The knock at dusk. The wind cut across the plains like a blade, carrying dust and the ghostly scent of rain. Clara Bennett kept her head down as she walked, clutching her coat tight around her frail frame. Her boots were split at the seams, soles thin as paper. Every step sank into the mud, and every breath scraped like dry glass in her chest. It had been 3 days since she'd eaten. The world had narrowed to one thought: food. She had stopped counting the miles. The prairie was endless, painted in gray and fading gold, and ahead of her, far beyond the broken fence line, a thin column of smoke twisted up into the winter sky. A cabin. For a moment, she thought it a mirage. Then, through the haze, the shape grew real: weathered wood, a slanted roof, and a faint light flickering in the window. She hesitated. Pride had carried her farther than she'd believed possible, but pride didn't fill an empty stomach. Her hand trembled as she climbed the short steps and lifted her knuckles to the door. The knock sounded too soft, barely more than a whisper against the storm. Inside, boots shifted. The door opened. Eli Ward filled the frame, tall, broad-shouldered, his face shadowed beneath the brim of a hat. His eyes, steady and unreadable, studied her with the quiet suspicion of a man used to solitude. The air smelled faintly of cedar smoke and stew. "We haven't eaten in 3 days," she said, voice cracking. "Please, I'll clean your cabin for food." He didn't move. The silence stretched long enough for her heart to stutter. Then, with a slow exhale, he stepped aside. "Come in." Warmth met her like an embrace. The cabin was small, single room, with stove, worn table. A dog lifted its head from the hearth, tail thumping once before settling again. "You're alone?" Eli asked, closing the door. Clara nodded. "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. He ladled soup into a tin bowl and set it before her without another word. The first spoonful nearly undid her. It wasn't just hunger. It was the sudden return of sensation, of being human again. She ate slowly, careful not to appear desperate, but he saw it anyway. His expression didn't soften, yet something in his gaze shifted. Curiosity, maybe pity, maybe both. When the bowl was empty, she folded her hands in her lap. "Thank you," she said. "I'll work to repay you. I can scrub, mend." "No need," he interrupted. "Eat first. Talk later." His tone was gruff, but not unkind. He poured himself coffee and sat across from her, the firelight drawing sharp lines across his face. He looked like a man carved from the land itself, steady, scarred, and half-wild. She studied the calluses on his hands, the faint tremor in his fingers. "You live alone?" He nodded. "Been that way a long time." "Your wife?" His jaw tightened. "Gone." The dog stirred at his feet, and the only sound for a while was the pop of the fire. Outside, wind clawed against the windows, and Clara let herself breathe, her body finally easing after days of flight. She didn't ask where she was or how far she'd come. She didn't dare tell him the truth, that she'd left a husband behind, that she'd walked away from a home that was never warm. He offered her a blanket and motioned toward the couch. "You can sleep there." She hesitated. "You don't even know my name." "Don't need to," he replied, turning toward the stove. "You're cold." "That's enough." She lay down, wrapping the coarse wool around her shoulders. The firelight painted the room in amber and shadow. She listened to the steady rhythm of his movements, the creak of the floorboards, the soft breathing of the dog. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Her thoughts drifted to the ring still clinging to her finger, the symbol of promises long broken. She turned it absently, remembering her husband's eyes, not with love, but calculation, remembering the whispers in town, the perfume on his collar. Her throat tightened. She turned toward the fire, blinking hard against the memories. The cabin smelled of earth and pine, of honesty. It was too easy to imagine that this quiet might last, that kindness could still exist without strings. Eli glanced over once before extinguishing the lantern. "Rest," he said simply. She nodded, though he couldn't see it. The light died, leaving only the embers' slow glow. Clara's breath steadied, her body sinking into the thin couch. Sleep hovered at the edge of her mind, fragile and unfamiliar. She listened to the dog sigh, the wind fade, the rancher's boots thud once across the floor. Outside, dawn was still hours away. Inside, for the first time since she'd left everything behind, Clara didn't feel like she was running. The story of a ring. The morning came quietly, spilling pale light through the cabin's single window. Smoke curled lazily from the stove, and the air held the scent of coffee and pine. Clara woke to the soft scrape of a chair. Eli was already up, boots on, shirt sleeves rolled, repairing a rope by the table. For a heartbeat, she forgot where she was. The warmth, the stillness, it felt like waking inside someone else's life. Then her stomach grumbled, reminding her of everything she'd run from. "You're up early," he said without looking at her. "I used to rise with the sun," she answered, pulling the blanket closer. "Old habits." He nodded once, tying the final knot. "Coffee's there if you want it." She poured some into a chipped cup. The bitterness stung her tongue, but it was comfort. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Two people who'd forgotten how to speak without defense. When she stood, she noticed the dust layering the shelves, the stack of dishes by the basin. "I'll start cleaning," she offered. "You gave me food. I want to earn it." Eli didn't protest. "There's soap under the sink." She worked in silence. The rhythmic scrape of her hands on worn was strangely soothing. The cabin spoke of years alone, tools perfectly arranged, one chair slightly more used than the other, no pictures on the walls. It was a home frozen in waiting. After a while, she paused to rest her hands. Eli had gone outside, tending to the horses. Through the window, she saw him move with measured ease, every gesture deliberate. There was something in the way he carried himself, a quiet strength, but also a weariness that felt familiar. Her eyes dropped to the ring on her finger. Its dull gold caught the morning light. She slid it off, turning it between her fingers until her reflection wavered across its surface. When Eli came back in, he saw it lying on the table beside her. "You're married," she said, voice low. He set his gloves aside, waiting. She didn't owe him an explanation, but the truth pressed against her chest until it ached. "His name's Thomas," she began. "He was a merchant in town, ambitious, charming." Her gaze drifted toward the window. "He wanted a wife who made him look respectable. I wanted someone who cared whether I was breathing." Eli leaned against the wall, listening without interruption. She continued, each word heavy and careful. "He had someone else. Marla James. Everyone knew before I did. When I found out, I didn't scream, didn't beg. I just walked out the door and kept walking." Her eyes glistened, though she didn't cry. "That was 4 days ago. I thought I'd make it to the next town, but the road didn't care how strong I thought I was." Eli's jaw worked, but he said nothing. The fire crackled between them, the sound filling the hollow spaces their stories had carved. After a moment, Clara forced a small smile. "Now I'm here, bothering a man who didn't ask for company." "You're not a bother," he said simply. His tone was quiet, sincere enough to sting. She looked up, meeting his eyes. "You said your wife was gone." He nodded once. 3 winters ago. Fever took her. After that, the house just stopped meaning anything. The words hung in the air, two griefs recognizing each other. Clara studied the lines around his eyes, the weight in his shoulders. He wasn't handsome in the way Thomas had been. His beauty came from endurance, from surviving solitude without bitterness. She returned to scrubbing, but the silence between them was different now, less guarded. When she dropped a plate and it clattered, Eli didn't flinch, only smiled faintly. "You don't have to clean everything in a day." "I like keeping busy," she said. "It helps me forget." "Does it work?" "Not really," she admitted. The dog, Shadow, patted over, settling by her feet. She reached down, scratching behind his ear. "At least someone still likes me." Eli chuckled softly, a sound rare and unpracticed. "He's a good judge of character." Outside, the wind eased, carrying with it the smell of damp earth. Time slowed, stretched thin, until afternoon light slanted through the window. Clara washed her hands, drying them on her skirt. "If you want, I can help with supper." He hesitated. "You cook." "Not well," she confessed. "But I can try." He handed her a tin of beans and a quiet nod of trust. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd been given in months. They worked together without speaking. The scrape of the knife, the hiss of the pan, the simple music of shared space. When they finally sat, neither ate quickly. The food wasn't remarkable, yet it felt sacred. Afterward, she gathered the dishes. He stopped her with a hand on her wrist. "You've done enough for today." For a heartbeat, she didn't move. His hand was warm, steady. Their eyes met, and something unspoken flickered in the space between recognition, temptation, fear. She withdrew gently, nodding. "All right." Eli cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "There's work on the fences tomorrow. You can stay a while if you need to." "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but sure. He looked toward the fire. "You don't owe me gratitude." "I know," she replied, "but I owe you honesty." The ring still lay between them on the table, its dull surface catching the firelight. Neither reached for it. Outside, dusk gathered again over the plains. Inside, two souls, one broken by betrayal, one by loss, sat close to a flame they both knew they shouldn't feed. Yet neither looked away. What the fire hides. By late afternoon, the sky had turned the color of bruised steel. The wind rose and low, uneasy moans, sweeping across the open land and rattling the cabin shutters. Eli stood by the window, watching the storm build. He'd seen weather like this before, sudden, fierce, and merciless. "Best stay inside tonight," he said. "Fence work will have to wait." Clara nodded, folding the last of the dry laundry. The air felt heavy, electric. Each gust outside pressed against the walls like a living thing trying to get in. When the first crack of thunder rolled across the hills, Shadow barked once before curling back near the hearth. Clara looked toward the window, her face lit by the flicker of lightning. "It's strange," she murmured. "Storms used to scare me." Eli glanced at her. "And now they sound honest," she said softly. "They don't pretend to be calm." He didn't reply, but the truth of her words lingered. He saw it in her, the restless energy of a heart too long silenced. She was still trembling from something deeper than cold. As rain began to hammer the roof, Clara moved closer to the fire, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Does it ever stop feeling empty?" she asked, eyes on the flames. "What do you mean?" "The quiet," she said, "when there's no one left to fill it." Eli took a slow breath. "No, you just learn to live beside it." She turned to face him, the firelight drawing warm color back into her tired features. "That sounds lonely." "It is," he admitted, "but honest like your storms." The wind howled, and for a moment neither spoke. He took 2 steps forward, knelt beside the hearth, and stirred the fire back to life. The movement brought him close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the faint scent of leather and smoke. When he rose, she handed him a cup of coffee she'd reheated. Their fingers brushed, a spark small but undeniable. "Thank you," he said. She smiled faintly. "For what?" "For bringing something alive back into this house." Her lips parted, but no words came. The thunder filled the silence for her. Outside, the rain thickened, drumming hard on the roof. Inside, the air between them shifted, charged, dangerous. The fire hissed as drops from the chimney hissed on the coals, the sound like a whispered warning neither of them heeded. Clara sat down near the hearth, drawing her knees close. "Thomas used to hate storms," she said quietly. "He said they made everything feel small. I think that's why I love them." Eli leaned against the table. "You left him because he betrayed you." "I left because he stopped seeing me," she said. The betrayal just made it easier. He watched her fingers twist the edge of her shawl. The fabric slipped, revealing a scar just below her collarbone. Thin, pale, almost invisible. Not violence, but memory. He forced himself to look away. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I wonder if I stopped seeing myself too." The confession hit him like a gust through an open door. He knew that feeling, the hollow where purpose used to live. Without thinking, he crossed the room and crouched beside her. "You're still here," he said. "That means something." Her eyes lifted to his. The fire painted both their faces in restless gold. "I shouldn't feel safe here," she murmured. "But I do." He hesitated, torn between decency and the pull of something older than reason. Maybe we both forgot what safe feels like. For a heartbeat, time held still. Then lightning flared through the window, white and merciless. In that instant, the room was a photograph, two souls, inches apart, outlined by flame and stormlight. When the thunder followed, she flinched. Instinctively, he reached out, his hand settling over hers. Her breath caught. Neither moved. The storm outside raged, but the greater storm gathered in the silence between them. She turned her hand, their fingers interlacing. The gesture was small, human, devastating. "Eli," she whispered. He closed his eyes, as if her voice hurt. "You should rest." "I can't," she said. "Not while everything feels like this." He wanted to step away. He didn't. The fire crackled louder, a sharp pop breaking the tension, but neither released the other's hand. Slowly, Clara reached up and slid the ring from the table, the ring she'd left there days ago. She turned it once in her palm, then set it down on the mantel beside the fire. Its dull surface reflected the flames before fading into shadow. When she looked back, Eli was still watching her, eyes dark, unreadable. The air between them pulsed with unspoken need, loneliness finding its mirror. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, fingers trembling with restraint. "I don't know if this is mercy or mistake," he murmured. "Maybe both," she replied. The next thunderclap swallowed the rest. Outside, the world blurred in rain. Inside, the fire burned low, hiding what words could not. When the storm finally began to quiet, Clara sat beside him, neither speaking nor touching again. The distance between them had changed forever. Eli stared into the dying embers, voice rough with something he didn't name. "Morning will come fast." She nodded, her gaze steady. "Then let it." And for the first time since the storm began, she didn't look away. The road out. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the land washed clean and glistening. Mist clung to the fields like breath over glass. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of rain and cooling ash. The fire had burned itself down to a few faint embers, soft and red as a heartbeat fading in the dark. Clara sat awake at the table, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. Her eyes followed the thin wisp of smoke rising from the stove. She had not slept. Across the room, Eli moved quietly, feeding the dog and filling the kettle. Neither spoke. Silence was safer now. It held the things they didn't dare name. When he finally turned, his voice was calm but heavy. "You should head back to town once the road dries." She nodded slowly. "I know." Outside, the world was a mirror, mud and sky the same gray, horizon disappearing into mist. Leaving would be easy to imagine and hard to do. The cabin had become something dangerous, a place where she'd remembered warmth. Eli set the kettle aside. "You don't have to explain anything," he said. "Last night was—" He stopped, searching for a word that didn't exist. "Human," she finished softly. He looked at her, startled by the truth in it. She stood, straightening the shawl around her shoulders. "I can't stay, Eli, and I can't go back to who I was. That woman died somewhere on the road before I reached your door." His hands tightened on the edge of the counter. "You could start again here." Clara smiled, tired but kind. "You and I both know this place was built for ghosts. You've been living with one. I'd only add another." He wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he poured coffee, the simple act to shield against feeling. "There's a horse you can take," he said. "You make better time that way." She crossed the room and touched his arm lightly. "I don't want to take anything from you." "You're not," he said. "You're returning something I'd forgotten existed." Her throat tightened. "What's that?" "Company," he murmured. The moment stretched. Outside, the first light of morning slipped through the clouds, painting the floorboards in pale gold. Clara's gaze drifted to the mantel where the ring still rested, dull against the wood. She picked it up, turning it in her palm one last time. "This used to mean forever," she said. "Now it feels like a story someone else lived." "Maybe that's all forever ever means," Eli said quietly. "A story you survive." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the same ache she carried. Love wasn't always meant to save. Sometimes it was only meant to remind. After a long silence, She placed the ring in his hand. "Keep it," she whispered. "Not as a promise, just proof that something real happened here." He closed his fingers around it, jaw working as if he might say more. Instead, he nodded once, the gesture heavy with acceptance. She gathered her small bag, the same one she'd carried through the plains. When she reached the door, the dog lifted its head, watching her with quiet understanding. She bent to scratch behind his ear. "Goodbye, Shadow." Eli followed her outside. The land stretched endless and open, the puddles reflecting the pale sky. Her boots sank softly into the wet earth as she walked toward the fence. "You'll find work in town," he said behind her. "They'll treat you fair." She turned, the wind catching her hair. "And you?" He glanced toward the horizon. "I'll keep the fire going, just in case." She smiled, small, trembling, true. "Then I'll try to deserve that." For a moment, neither moved. The silence between them was no longer painful. It was full, alive. She wanted to say his name again, but the words stayed behind her teeth. Some things were meant to remain unspoken, carried instead in memory. Then she turned and began walking. Each step grew lighter as the cabin receded into the mist. The road wound through fields reborn after rain, grass gleaming like silver. The air was clean, new, unpromised. Eli watched until she vanished from sight. Only then did he look down at the ring, still in his hand. The firelight from inside flickered against the metal, catching in the faint engraving along its edge, a name worn smooth by years of touch. He set it gently on the windowsill beside his coffee cup, where the morning light could find it. Shadow padded up beside him, leaning against his leg. The rancher exhaled, slow and steady, feeling both emptier and more alive than he had in years. In the distance, thunder rolled again, far away now, soft as a memory fading. Eli closed the door, returning to the quiet rhythm of his life. Yet as he moved about the cabin, the silence no longer felt like loneliness. It was something else, something that breathed. And somewhere down the long, open road, Clara rode toward whatever came next, the scent of cedar smoke still clinging to her clothes. The echo of his kindness lodged deep in her chest. Neither of them would speak of that night again, but both would live differently because of it. The world outside gleamed under a washed sky, and the day began anew. Gentle, unmarked, honest.